The intervention had been Mom's idea. A family meeting at Uncle Richard's mansion. Her text that morning had been short and ominous. "We need to talk about your future, sweetheart." I knew exactly what that meant. Another roundtable where my successful relatives dissected my supposedly disastrous life choices and prescribed cures. These had become a quarterly tradition ever since I walked away from my consulting job 3 years ago. Richard's Belleview Palace was the perfect stage for such events, a sprawling glass and steel mansion perched over Lake Washington, furnished like a magazine spread and humming with the unspoken reminder that Richard had made it. I arrived on time with a $12 bottle of wine tucked under my arm. Everyone else was already arranged in Richard's living room: Mom, Dad, Aunt Susan, my brother Michael, and cousin Jennifer, drinks in hand. They wore that mix of discomfort and determination people get before an intervention. "Jessica," Richard boomed as I walked in. "Perfect timing. We were just discussing your situation." "Ah, my situation," family shorthand for my lack of a corporate title. 6-figure salary, or mortgage at age 31. "Sit, Richard said, motioning to the solitary chair planted across from the rest. "Courtroom style. We want to help." Jennifer poured me a glass of wine. I smiled politely. "That's very kind." Richard leaned back, already assuming the role of commanding speaker. "We think it's time for some tough love." Michael jumped in eagerly. "Jess, you're 31. You can't keep drifting forever." Dad added, "At your age I had the hardware store, a house, and 2 kids. You need stability." Aunt Susan gave me her most sympathetic smile. "Sweetheart, we worry. That little apartment, part-time jobs, no savings, what happens when you're older?" I sipped my wine and waited. This was Richard's show. "Success doesn't just appear," he said, voice smooth and practiced. "It takes discipline and vision." I didn't build TechFlow Solutions by accident. TechFlow Solutions, his software empire, now a $300 million darling of the industry. For 4 years it had been his go-to sermon illustration. From nothing to $100 million company. Mom chimed in, glowing. Richard corrected her with a modest shrug. "Closer to 300, actually." Admiration rippled through the room. TechFlow had hundreds of employees, multiple offices, an IPO rumor swirling. Richard was the family monument to achievement. He continued, "Real entrepreneurs don't need handouts. We bootstrap, we sacrifice, we create value." Jennifer nodded like a starstruck disciple. "So inspiring. Proof anyone can build something if they work hard enough." "Which brings us to you, Jessica," Richard said, eyes narrowing in faux concern. "I have a proposal. TechFlow's expanding accounting. I could make a spot for you, great salary, full benefits, a clear path forward, a real future." The room hushed, waiting for my gratitude. "That's generous of you, Richard, but..." He cut me off, voice hardening. "But you don't think accounting's a fit, Jess? You can't afford to be picky, you need income." Dad chimed in. "Sometimes you take jobs you don't love to reach the ones you do." Richard leaned forward, tone shifting to lecture mode. "That's the problem, you've never learned entrepreneurial discipline. Entrepreneurs don't get the luxury of passion. We grind." I worked 18-hour days, no weekends, no vacations, to build TechFlow. That's what separates us from employees who expect paychecks just for showing up. Jennifer added helpfully, "Like working part-time at nonprofits." Richard nodded. "Exactly. There's nothing wrong with being an employee, but pretending to be entrepreneurial while relying on handouts? That's the issue. And Jessica, I think it's time you stopped chasing hobbies and started building something real." I nodded politely. "I understand." "Good," Richard said with satisfaction. "Then you'll consider the TechFlow position? Starting at $85,000, likely more than you've ever earned." Actually, last year my investments brought in $47 million, but this didn't seem like the right moment to share. "That's very generous," I said smoothly. Richard smiled, pleased with himself. Not generosity, opportunity. The intervention stretched on another hour, full of budgeting tips, career planning lectures, and financial advice I didn't need. I sipped my wine, nodding at the right moments, wondering how long before they discovered I didn't need rescuing at all. Richard spent the rest of the evening spinning more tales about bootstrapping and self-reliance. I nodded along, asking the occasional question that let him expand on his philosophy of grit and sacrifice. By the time I left, everyone seemed satisfied. They thought I'd finally absorbed the guidance I needed to straighten out my life. I hugged them all goodbye, drove back to my modest Capitol Hill apartment, and poured myself a glass of wine, far better than the $12 bottle I'd brought to Richard's. Then I opened my laptop. Richard's sermon on bootstrap entrepreneurship was especially amusing considering TechFlow Solutions had never been bootstrapped at all. Its lifeline had been outside capital, $193 million of it across 3 funding rounds, an $8 million seed, $35 million Series A, and $150 million Series B. The lead investor in every round was Cascade Ventures, a private equity firm holding a 67% stake. What Richard didn't know was that Cascade was a shell, owned by Pacific Capital, which was owned by Meridian Holdings, which was controlled by a trust I'd set up 6 years ago. I was Cascade. I was the anonymous investor. I was the source of every dollar Richard believed came from serious institutional backers. The irony was almost poetic. Richard's entire empire, the one he used to lecture me about discipline and sacrifice, stood on capital I had quietly provided. The niece he pitted for lacking direction was the only reason his company existed at all. I'd backed TechFlow because the fundamentals were strong, solid technology, smart market positioning, and scalable operations. Richard being family had made me more cautious, not less. I'd done rigorous due diligence before committing, but as TechFlow grew, Richard's lectures about self-made success had grown too, sermons delivered with all the confidence of someone who believed he'd climbed Everest barefoot, unaware someone had quietly built the staircase beneath him. I opened my secure email and drafted a message to my wealth management team at Pacific Capital. Please schedule a call regarding TechFlow Solutions, considering changes to our investment structure. Patricia Williams replied within the hour. Available tomorrow. Current position, $193 million across 3 rounds. Company performance remains strong. Strategic review requested. The next afternoon, I called. Miss Chin, Patricia said smoothly. Thank you for making time. You're considering divesting from TechFlow? Yes, I want to liquidate our full position. May I ask why? Philosophical differences with management, I said evenly, particularly regarding their public narrative of success and its actual source. Patricia was silent for a moment before responding carefully. Understood. Options would include selling to another institutional buyer, though unloading $193 million in secondary shares will take time. Alternatively, we could exercise liquidation preferences, demanding immediate return of capital plus accrued returns. What would that mean for TechFlow? They couldn't cover it, she said. The company is profitable but not cash-rich. Without replacement investors, they'd face bankruptcy. And Richard's personal exposure? Patricia skimmed through her notes. He's personally guaranteed roughly $25 million in company debt. He'd also lose his equity stake, valued around $98 million at current estimates. I let the numbers hang in the air. So, I said slowly, my bootstrap preaching uncle would go from self-made mogul to personally bankrupt. That's correct, I told Patricia. I'll get back to you with a decision. The logical part of me knew liquidation was reckless. TechFlow was thriving, steady growth, strong margins, hundreds of employees depending on its success. Destroying it would hurt more than Richard. But the emotional part of me, the part sick of being scolded about handouts, wanted him to finally understand that his empire existed because of mine. That evening, Richard called. Jessica, have you thought more about the TechFlow position? I have, I said. It's a generous offer. Excellent. When can you start? Actually, I replied, I had a question about your bootstrap philosophy. A pause. What kind of question? You said real entrepreneurs don't need handouts, but didn't TechFlow raise outside capital? Richard chuckled. That's not a handout. That's strategic investment, sophisticated partners betting on my vision. So, not free money? Of course not. Investors expect returns. They do due diligence. They demand accountability. That's what separates investment from charity. How much have you raised? He hesitated, then said proudly, roughly $200 million across several rounds. Impressive. And those investors just believed in you? They believed in my execution. If I fail, I lose everything. If I succeed, everyone wins. That's capitalism. I see, I said. So your success wasn't bootstrapped, it was funded. That's a naive way of putting it, he snapped. Or a simple one. Jessica, venture funding isn't the same as handouts. Don't confuse the two. Funny, I said quietly, because I'm one of your investors. Richard barked out a laugh. That's impossible. Why? Because our investors are billion-dollar institutions. You do part-time bookkeeping. You couldn't possibly. What if I told you Cascade Ventures, your lead investor, is owned by companies I control? Silence. Jessica, he said at last, his voice unsteady, that's not funny. I'm not joking. $193 million, seed. Series A. Series B, all mine. Stanford MBA. Early exits. 6 years of reinvestment. The Corolla and the studio apartment? Choices, not limitations. He struggled for words. If this is true, why didn't you ever tell me? Why would I? You seemed so proud of building your empire on self-reliance. I didn't want to ruin the story. You let me treat you like someone who needed rescuing. And now you know the truth. He exhaled shakily. Jessica. I'm sorry, I had no idea. If I'd known. If you'd known what? That I was wealthy? Would that have changed your lectures? It puts things in perspective. Perspective? I asked. So I deserve respect if I have money, but not if I don't? That's not what I meant. I was trying to help. You were trying to help someone you thought was a failure. Now that you know I'm not, suddenly I don't need help? Jessica, please, Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow, Cascade will exercise liquidation preferences. TechFlow will have 30 days to return $193 million. Or it collapses. His breath caught. No, you can't. That would destroy everything. It would destroy a company built on what you'd call handouts. Tell me, Richard, are you asking me for one now? I'm asking for understanding. The kind you showed me? Silence. That's what I thought. I said, the papers will be filed in the morning. Jessica, wait, please. I hung up. Within hours, my phone lit up with calls from Mom, Dad, Michael, Jennifer, all tipped off by Richard. I ignored them all and opened my laptop. The authorization to Patricia took less than a minute. By Monday, TechFlow would be in free fall. Richard's $300 million valuation, gone. His reputation as a bootstrap legend, shattered. And me? I'd go back to my quiet life and my part-time bookkeeping, because I genuinely liked helping small business owners manage their books. The difference was that now Richard knew the truth. Every lecture he'd given me about handouts had been directed at the very person who'd funded his empire. Exactly as Patricia predicted, TechFlow would collapse.